Next, we talk to the sheriff of Sangamon County, Neil Williamson. The sheriff goes in depth on such issues as funding for the state's sheriff departments, the challenge of running a jail at the county level, and the effect of Mexican drug cartels on the drug trade in Illinois and Sangamon County. This runs about 35 minutes.
Neil Williamson, thanks for joining us on the Illinois Channel.
Thanks for having me here today. Glad to be here.
As the sheriff of Sangamon County, you're soon going to be leaving this post, but as I understand, you've been in office for about 20 years. I think you're just about to celebrate your anniversary on the job, is there?
Correct.
And let's see, before that you were in the police force with the city of Springfield.
Right. When I graduated from Western University over at Macomb in 1973, I was one of the very first college graduates that ever started with the Springfield Police Department. They just weren't heard of then. And I started in October of 1973 with the Springfield Police Department. And I spent 20 years and 8 months there. The last 10 years, of course, was with the Sangamon County and Menard County Crime Stoppers program. And that's kind of was the thrust for my job as sheriff, because in the 10 years of being the spokesman for the Crime Stoppers program, of course, Neil Williamson was pretty much a household word in this area. And after I got my 20 years on, this position of sheriff was becoming available, and I was actually appointed sheriff on the 13th of July 1994 to fill out the last 4 months of the then sheriff, Bill DeMarco. And so that was in July of 94, and I had to stand for election in November of 94, just 4 months later. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm just finishing up, I'll finish up 20 years and 4 months as the Sangamon County Sheriff.
You know, the thing is, as the Illinois Channel, since we're seen around the state, we don't really want to, we typically don't talk just to local officials at a county level, but relative to any number of offices, and I think the sheriff, every county has a sheriff, often we, citizens don't really necessarily know. We think we might know, but we really don't understand what someone does in their position. So
Sure.
To that extent, let's explore the idea. Maybe you could help us understand what is the role of a sheriff, and not just how is the job here in Sangamon, but to the extent that you interact with your other sheriffs around the state. You could kind of fill us in.
Yeah.
What is the role of a sheriff, and what are some of the particular challenges to the job?
Sure. Well, unlike chiefs of police in many cities, their chiefs are appointed by the local and various mayors, where sheriffs are always elected by the people. So I think that's the main significant difference between chiefs of police and sheriffs. Sheriffs are elected by the people, and we serve a 4-year term. We have 3 main duties. The sheriff is the highest elected, well, actually the highest law enforcement official in any county. Our 3 main duties are, number 1, we have to have a jail. And out of the 102 sheriffs in the state, there's about 10 sheriffs that do not have jails. I call them the luckiest guys in the world, because that's a tough job. But even if you don't have a jail, you are still responsible for the people that are arrested in that county. So what you have to do, you transport your inmates over to the neighboring jail. Most of those jails are in southern Illinois. So besides the jail, we're also responsible for security in the court. We're responsible for the security of judges and anybody else that may be coming into the courthouse to transact normal business. And number 3, we are responsible for delivery of court papers from the court, such as notices to appear, orders of protection, and warrants. Those are the 3 main duties. But most sheriffs, other than those 3, are what we call full service. They not only complete those 3 duties, but they have patrol duties. They patrol the rural areas outside of the main county seat in that particular county. Like what we have outside of Springfield, we're responsible for the entire area outside of the city of Springfield.
Now, some, obviously, counties vary in size.
Right.
Sangamon County is, I would guess, more or less on the average size.
Well, it's very challenging because we are the 5th largest county in the state by land size. We're 870 square miles, and we're about 7th or 8th by population. So you can see we're right up there with some of the northern counties, the collar counties of Cook County. We're the capital city, so I call us kind of a metropolitan type area. We have we're so diverse here. We have the metropolitan Springfield area with all the things that go along with that, with the city government, state government, all the politics, but within 10 miles, we're in a very rural, agricultural type based business. So we're a very diverse county. Plus with all the tourism we get, one of the most highly visited
because of the Lincoln sites.
With the Lincoln presidential, the home and the tomb and the library and the museum, people from literally all over the world come to visit and spend time, not only in Springfield, but outside into the rural areas.
Now, again, we're taping in Springfield. The city of Springfield has their own police department. Do you also tour or patrol, I should say, within the city, or do you leave that to the city police and you always go outside the boundaries of the city?
Well, and you're right. Our main duties are outside the city of Springfield, but Springfield's really unique. There's about 5 or 6 main areas in Springfield that we call holes in the donut. And these are areas that are actually within the city that are unincorporated.
Like Jerome is an area.
Well, actually, it's not Jerome, because they have their own police department.
Oh,
these are areas that are small areas within the city that they don't have a mayor, they don't have a village trustees, but they're their own entity within the city, but the city has not incorporated them into their jurisdiction, because if they did, they would have to provide sidewalks, they would have to provide police protection, lighting, and they haven't done that. And there's about 5 significant areas. And so people always wonder, well, Sheriff, why do I always see these Sangamon County Sheriff cars? You're supposed to be out in the county, out in the country, out by the farmers. Why do you see them in Springfield? And that's why, because about 60 to 70% of the calls that we handle every year come from within the city of Springfield. And so, and the
60 to 70%?
60 to 70%. And we have about 35,000 calls a year that we handle. So 20 to 25,000 calls we handle come from within the city of Springfield.
Let me ask you this. Everyone knows, I think everyone's business or even our personal lives have been changed by the advent of technology, by the internet, which really was just coming on the scene about the time you became the sheriff.
Correct.
Has that technology in any way, has technology in general changed the role of the sheriff, and if so, how has it changed the job that the sheriffs do around the state?
Well, it has. I mean, technology it changes so rapidly, and you know, the general public, including the criminals, have all the technology. They have cell phones, they have computers, they have the internet, and we have to keep up. But being a public entity, the main problem we have is money, trying to keep up with the technology. You know, just think of yourself at home trying to keep up with computers and 60-inch TVs and trying to buy these things. You can't do it. And we're the same way. But when we buy a computer for our squad car, we have to buy 60 of them. When we buy computers for our secretaries, we buy 30 to 40 at a time. You're literally talking millions of dollars. And so we're always lagging just a little bit behind, I think, in the technology where we like to be, basically for the money. But I would have to say, in the 40 years that I've been involved in law enforcement, the biggest thing, without a doubt, are communications with radios and technology and computers has made a huge impact in the way we conduct business.
Has it helped or has it hurt or what?
It's definitely helped, but you know, a lot of people 30 years ago, they said, well, we're going to go to a paperless society and a paperless communications. Well, I think we buy paper by the truckload now. It hasn't changed, even though we're gathering so much more information from people when we make reports, when we book them into the jail and everything. All this information is logged in computers, but we still have mounds and mounds of paperwork that we generate each and every single day. It's just amazing.
Let's go back to, you mentioned the jail and what a headache that is, and virtually every county, and again, just to extrapolate this as far as representative across the state, what are the challenges of running a jail at the county level? Is it a cost factor or just what?
Well, in our jail, this is the 3rd jail that I've seen in my lifetime, and I'm only 63 years old. And every time they built a jail, they built it twice the size of the old one. And you're never going to be able to build a jail large enough to accommodate the inmates you could have. And this jail we have now was built 22 years ago, and after it was 10 years old, it was outdated because of the size. It was built to hold 300 inmates, but about 5 years ago we had 450 inmates in that jail. We had to do something. We couldn't afford to build a new jail, so we sat down with the state's attorney, the public defender, the sheriff, probation people saying, what can we do to move some of these cases through and get some of these inmates out so we won't have the log jam and there's people on top of each other in the jail. And we have, over the last couple of years, the judges they've sped up trials, they've lowered bonds, they've moved people out to the state penitentiary quicker once they've been sentenced.
And why are people in the jail? So they get arrested. Is it pending trial?
Yes. Let's say we have 300 people in a county jail. Out of those 300 we have here, I would say the 250 have been arrested and are waiting for trial. Very, very few of the people we have in our jail have actually been sentenced to a county jail, because you can be sentenced in a county jail from 1 to 364 days. Anything longer has to go to a state penitentiary. So the ones we have in our jail that are sentenced, there are only about 50 of them out of the 300. And a lot of times we'll make trustees out of those inmates. These people have been arrested maybe for their second DUI or fourth suspended license, or maybe they're here for retail theft or something, and they're going to be here for 30 days. We'll make them a trustee where they cook the food, they clean, they do the laundry, they wax the floors, they serve the meals. So we actually use them to help us run this operation down there, which is just a massive operation. The other 250 are waiting for trial, and they could wait anywhere from a few months that we've had them here as long as 3 years waiting for their trial to come to court. But they get delayed and postponed and continued just for a myriad of reasons. And we have them waiting here for months and months upon months.
What does it cost to keep a prisoner?
The cost is probably $15,000 to $20,000 a year per inmate. But I can tell you right now that we spend $750,000 a year just for medical costs for the inmates. We're responsible for all their medical care. We spend $500,000 a year for food. So those two expenses alone are $250,000 just for the medical and the food, just for the inmates. Now people can't imagine that. Another big problem with Terry is mental health problems. We have seen probably over the last, 15 years, a steady increase in homeless people, people with mental illnesses into the jail. And have they committed a crime? Yes, they have. Have they done something wrong that should get them in jail? Yes. But do they belong in jail? Probably not. But there are no other facilities available for them to seek help. Families don't want them. They've been thrown on the street. More and more facilities are closing, and they fall through the net. So what happens? Where do they end up? In the jail.
So when we talk as a society, sometimes we hear about providing mental health services. I guess one way or another you might say we're dealing with the cost of that anyway.
Somebody somewhere is going to bear the cost. There's only so many social centers that can provide help. People like the Salvation Army and Helping Hands, but they get overwhelmed and their facilities overflow, and so the people are then on the street, and then they get hungry and they get themselves in trouble. They'll get involved in drugs. They break into something. They'll snatch a purse, and they end up down in jail, where if they would have had a safety net, a family member, someplace that could help them, they probably wouldn't be in there. So then they get into jail, and they don't get any better. They don't take medicine. They spiral downwards, and it's very sad. And they end up in some state facility if we can ever get them in there. So it's very, very difficult.
When you talk to your fellow, it seems to me anytime you talk inside baseball in any industry, there's people that are frustrated about some aspect of it, or they wish something would change. When you talk to your fellow sheriffs, is there an overwhelming complaint? Is it the delay of the court system? Is it that they're not funded properly? Because I'm thinking as a society, sometimes we as a people can say, hey, if we were aware of a problem, we could join in and talk to the powers that be, the politicians, and say, why don't you work with the sheriff to get better technology or this or that? What should we as a society be fixing about our sheriff's departments?
I think the common denominator here, and I'm sure that all 102 sheriffs would agree, would have to be funding. Whenever I go to my sheriff's meetings, we sit around conference tables and talk about the lack of money that the county boards have. And it's too bad the county boards, they're hurting for money. The counties around the state, where cities, a lot of cities that are home rule, without going to the voters, they can raise taxes. They can raise sales tax, they can raise different things to raise revenues for the various cities. But the counties have to go back to the voters for referendums, like we do here in Sangamon County, if they want to raise money. And this county board is very, very conservative. They've been very good with the money, and we're always in the black. But it's almost to the point where it's a detriment to the sheriff. We've had to cut back a lot of services. We could just do a lot more if we had the funding.
Have you had to cut back on staffing?
We have. I mean, 6 years ago we had 76 deputies. Today we're at 62. We're at the same number in the jail, but we've cut back. We've had to eliminate. We did eliminate the drug team, the warrant team, crime prevention, the traffic office. They all suffered because of manpower cutbacks. We did bring back our dirt team because we saw how much crime was going up because we had no presence on the streets as far as fighting the drug problem. So we brought them back, and now we've seen the crime go back down again. But I think if you talk to any of the 102 sheriffs in this state, and probably the 3,000 sheriffs in the United States, they would say that funding and having adequate money to provide the services that we have to give to our citizens, that would be the number one thing we could all wish for.
I know any one of these things we could explore at length, but I want to bounce around and get a couple of other ideas before we run out of time. We hear, as we tape this, we have a whole crisis going on with the border.
Oh.
We hear about the infiltration from both Central America and Mexico.
Yeah.
I've heard from various sources, including federal law enforcement, that some of the Mexican drug cartels are taking over distribution of drugs out of Chicago. That Highway 55, which is not far from where we sit, has become a major drug route, moving drugs up. To what extent are you seeing that, if at all?
Well, we have a drug team that's been operating now for about 8 years. It was started primarily to combat methamphetamine, which was easily made with materials you could buy at your local Walmart. But because the Attorney General got a law passed where you could only purchase 2 boxes of pseudoephedrine from a local drugstore, that has really helped to curb the methamphetamine trade. So our main problems now are heroin, marijuana, and crack cocaine. And we're seeing a lot of it. And you are right. The main pipeline from Mexico through Texas is right up through Interstate 55, through here, Peoria, and Chicago. And the state police and DEA do a real good job of tracking the drugs, but you know what? They get just a fraction of the amount of drugs and money that's coming through these interstates.
Is there an answer to that?
There's I don't know, the demand. I mean, the only way to get rit of it is to get rid of the demand, and the demand is always going to be there. There's a insatious demand for illegal drugs, cocaine and pot. You can see the states now, or you get Colorado and Washington State have legalized marijuana.
And I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah.
I mean, you know the arguments. Everyone here knows the arguments. The thing is that marijuana is not considered to be a hard drug, whereas cocaine is, heroin certainly is. Do you or your fellow sheriffs have any ideas as far as should we minimize the going after the marijuana trade and focus more on the hard, or should we just continue doing what we're doing?
Well, that's a great question, and I see good in both sides of the answer. But having been in law enforcement for 40 years and going along with the other 102 sheriffs in this county, I really do think we're going down a slippery slope when we pass the marijuana laws. Now, I can go along with the medical marijuana, but as far as liberalizing it further to just open up marijuana to anybody, I think really in 10 to 15 years, maybe even sooner than that, you're going to see Colorado, maybe Washington, go back on some of their liberalism as far as passing these marijuana laws, because I really do think that it's just going to open up a lot of problems as far as societal problems, divorces and addictions and other things that we don't see yet because it's too early. But if we think we have a problem with alcohol, and look, it's been legal since the 30s, you think you have a problem with that, it's going to get the same thing with pot, I think.
Sheriff, every association, so the Sheriff's Association being one too, often has a legislative agenda. What if you as an association could address the law, change it, add it, alter it, what are you all looking at?
Well, there's one law that, with the FOIA law that is good, but it allows inmates to FOIA all their records and pictures. And so we have a man that works in our records section that he was had different jobs within records, but now all he does is handle FOIA requests, that's Freedom of Information requests, from inmates in our jail because they're asking for their own arrest records and their pictures. And once the word gets around the jail, now you've got 200 guys requesting this all the time, and they want their reports, they want everything, and then we have to give it to them.
What do they do with their photos?
Just keep them, put them in a file. We can't deny this.
You know, speaking of that, I knew someone in Missouri who had a DUI, and there was a website that ended up out of Florida publishing, I guess they gather this, they published the DUIs, and it's really kind of a shakedown because they charge you several $100s to take your mugshot down.
Oh, yeah.
Is that something that, I don't know, A, if you're aware of, and B, to what extent are we having, under the guise of transparency, are we inadvertently having sheriff's departments or police departments becoming unwilling collaborators with people who are basically scam artists?
Well, that's one side of the law that we don't like, but again, it's the freedom of information. These are public records. Some things that happen to people...
Does it have to be put onto a website? In other words, I don't know how they're getting it, if they're getting it offline, or can it just be if you want it, you can only get it as a photograph?
They can call here, they can come in, they can write, and they can ask for all the mugshots of people that were arrested for DUI during the month of December. And we have to give it to them within a timely fashion. This is public information. We have to give it to them. And some things that happen to people aren't too flattering. And they will end up on the internet. People have to remember that. But it's...
Which is a whole new realm, obviously, in the last 20 years. It used to be that you were shamed maybe in your small community. Now you could go take a new job in Oregon or something, and they find out that you were arrested for a DUI or something 3 years ago.
Absolutely. And so these records are out there, and they're not flattering. That's one thing I think the young people need to remember. We all do crazy, silly things, and we get stupid and do silly things. When you're older, you say, why did I do that? So these kids that are 18, 19, 20, that get arrested for maybe a DUI, remember, that's going to stay with you for the rest of your life. That picture will be there, that record. If any job that you apply for, and you say, they ask you, have you ever been arrested? You have to say yes. So you remember that. Whether it's a minor thing for shoplifting a tube of lipstick from the Macy's, or a DUI, or maybe some silly fight you got in college, that is on your police record forever. And so just remember that. You
had mentioned earlier the lack of funding and how you had to cut back on your personnel. And is that also true across the state?
Some counties are better than others. Some counties had weathered this economic storm a little better than other counties. There are some counties that passed a 1/4% public safety sales tax. And was not too popular with county boards because they're viewed as tax increasers, but a 1/4% in Sangamon County would raise about $5 million a year. That's a 1/4% sales tax.
And let's put in perspective, what is your overall budget?
My budget is $18.2 million.
So $5 million would be a significant, almost a 30% increase.
But you understand, it's a public safety sales tax, and that public safety is, you can use the term broadly. We would share that with the sheriff. The coroner could use the funds, and also the state's attorney. They are desperately short of manpower, and they need to increase the salaries of their assistants so they can attract and keep good prosecutors in that office. And you say $5 million, that's a tremendous amount of money. Well, if I hired the 13 deputies, just to get back to where I was 6 years ago, that would cost me $1.3 million. It's about $100,000 for every deputy.
What is a typical salary of a deputy?
A starting salary is about $43,000, starting walking in the door. But they have to have a 4-year college degree here at Sangamon County. But
and how do you get up to $100,000? You got benefits.
Well, you're talking about benefits, their Social Security, their pension, their IMRF, everything else. So all that package with their training.
And of course, that's the starting. After 5 or 6 years,
a 10-year
you'd be making,
deputy,
what,
$70,000. Yeah, 10 to 15-year deputy. So it's a good job. They've got a good contract. They have a good union, and they've got a good retirement. And a lot of people are jealous of the deputy's retirement because after 20 years they get half salary. After 25 years, it's 60%. And so it's a good salary. But not a lot of people want to strap that gun on and go out at 2 o'clock in the morning and wrestle with some nut.
I was going to ask, is it easy to find qualified people, or is it difficult?
Easy. It's easy to find them. And people say, well, Sheriff, you raised your standards so high. You've got a 4-year degree. Well, you know, more and more people have degrees now. It doesn't have to be in law enforcement. But we're finding that most people have a 4-year degree. And when I interview them for the job, I'm looking for more than just their education requirements. I'm looking for people that have character and morals and values and a work ethic and compassion for people and empathy and a sense of humor and just a hard worker and can talk to people. Those are more important than anything to make a well-rounded deputy that's going to be here for 20 to 30 years.
We just interviewed 2 authors who wrote the book Fixing Illinois, and they had any number of reforms along the line of maybe reforming things and making a dollar go further. Are there any ways that we could cut down on the individual jails for every county and maybe have regional jails that might be more efficient? And to that extent, is that ever discussed, or other reforms?
Well, I tell you what, there's a tri-county jail in southern Illinois where 3 counties have gone in and they use one facility. And as far as I know, it's working just fine.
Has it saved them money over individually?
Yeah, I can't really speak to that, but it definitely has saved the counties that didn't have to build their own jail. The only trouble is the transportation to and from that facility, because every day they have to bring inmates back to appear before court. But one thing
can we use technology there to where we don't have to transport them, but we can just have them Skype or something?
Yeah, video. We're using it in our jail. It's called video arraignment, where the inmate is in the jail, sits before a TV camera, and the judge in the courthouse about a half a block away can see the inmate.
Which also makes it easier just from a security standpoint, does it?
Well, exactly. We don't have to transport 20 or 30 inmates back and forth to the courthouse. But one thing that's been on the burner here in Sangamon County for 40 years, it's just been talked about, but it's too much of a hot potato that nobody politically wants to talk about it, is merging the sheriff's office with the Springfield Police, a metro-type police department in Sangamon County. On paper, it makes sense. It's cost-saving.
And why would it make sense?
Because you would eliminate all these duplications of services.
Of the administration?
Administration, purchasing. You would meld together the patrol units, the detectives. I mean, these detectives are working a lot of times with the same criminals, the same cases, same drug dealers, same bank robbers, same car thieves, same things. You know, the public is confused. A lot of times we get people to come in here and they want to make a report. We have to say, no, it happened in the city. You got to go across the street, and vice versa. They go to the city. They say, we got to make a report. No, we go to the county. So,
and by the same token, when you're investigating, does it break down communications because you're 2 different entities? As far as maybe a murder, or there's some drug criminal activity going on. To what extent, we often hear about the turf battles, and maybe or maybe it's not a turf battle. Maybe it's merely because it's a different entity.
Well, there's a little jealousy.
The lines of communication.
There's jealousies between departments, just like there are baseball teams or anything else. But ever since the 911 happened in New York, police departments, especially local and federal agencies, have communicated much better than we used to in the past. We sit down and talk. We have monthly meetings. We talk about policies and what we're doing, what they're doing. But when there's a big rash of burglaries, when there's a string of armed robberies, when there's a string of drug dealers or murders, the first thing we do is what? Well, let's get a task force together, and maybe we can get our people together and work on this. Well, if it works for that, why wouldn't it work every day on everyday crime to get people together? It just makes sense, and it's something that the time is going to come, but nobody wants to really bite that bullet and just say, but okay, who's going to be in charge of it? The sheriff, who's the highest elected official, or the mayor? Does the mayor want to give up that power and authority of a 250-man police department with the power that wields? So it's very interesting.
Is there a legislative, would a legislative approach from, the state help to break down some of those barriers?
I don't think it's something you can legislate, because every town is run by itself. It's like the city of Springfield, it's home rule. And
So that's not going to work.
It
But what
wouldn't
about
work.
when you mentioned cooperation with the feds? Now, we had the Department of Homeland Security, which
Right.
didn't exist when you started.
No.
Money went into that, fight terrorism and all. Does any of that trickle down to, as far as Homeland Security, to
Well,
sheriff's departments?
And it's interesting you mention that, because even though the Homeland Security is great and what they're doing to protect this country is wonderful, it has siphoned off a lot of money that 10 years ago used to go to police departments for training, for equipment, for computers, for radios, for grant money. It's all dried up because that money.
And so it's difficult for sheriff's departments to get new communications
New
equipment?
communications and computers. And we used to get grants. We would have grants totaling the millions of dollars for computers and radio equipment, computers for our cars. It's very, very difficult to get one now. The one we have now, we went jointly with the Springfield Police Department and the Sheriff's Office and all the local agencies to get what we have now. But it's tough to keep these things running without grant money. And the Homeland Security is kind of siphoned that off.
We often talk about congressmen bringing home the bacon, and people often think of that as being a waste of federal dollars. But
Yeah.
to what extent do you ever talk to any of the local, I think we got about
Yeah.
3 different congressional districts
yeah.
coming together in this area. Do you talk to U.S. congressmen or
We
even
do.
Senator Durbin or Kirk about helping to get grants and what the needs are? And 1 and 2, to the extent that you talk, do you talk as individual sheriffs, or do you say it as a body that, hey, we all need to have some help here because we're hurting?
Yeah, it's both. Well, in general, the representatives will talk to our Sheriff's Association. But we're very fortunate here to have Representative Shimkus and Schock. And Schock has been very helpful to our Sheriff's Office in acquiring some grants. About 6 years ago, it was a very significant grant of about $650,000 that we used to upgrade all the security in this courthouse, cameras and lighting and things that we didn't have before that we had to have, and we wouldn't have been able to do it at all without what we call the Schock grant. So it's been very, very beneficial.
Lastly, something that is relatively new and was controversial, but Illinois was the last state to pass concealed carry.
Yeah.
As far as that being rolled out and the implementation of it, to what extent, what's the role of the local sheriff's department, and to what extent is that a good thing for you to handle, or has it become an unwieldy burden?
It's not a burden at all, and I think it was long overdue as far as I'm concerned. The only purpose that we have is once a person applies to the state, and then the state will bring back to us the names of the people from this county that applied, and we have the opportunity to either object or say yes to this person. And I can think of the hundreds and hundreds that have applied from Sangamon County. I don't think we've rejected anyone. So it's working fine as far as I know. There have been no incidents. Will they happen? Yeah, they probably will. Somebody's going to get crazy and do something stupid. But they do that already. So,
one last thing, I guess, and I said, relative to whatever county one's living in, I guess the citizens can be also the eyes and ears of bad activity, or maybe they know someone who's engaged in criminal activity.
Yeah.
To what extent do you, in any sheriff's department, welcome the participation of the public in helping to nail people engaged in criminal activity? And can you talk to them without them having to give you their names and numbers?
Sure.
Because a lot of people want to remain anonymous.
well, that's true. Well, again, in all my career in law enforcement, the involvement of the public is so important in supporting law enforcement. Not just financially with their taxes and things, but information. Who else knows more about their own community? Who lives next door to them, going up and down the street, what's happening in schools, than the people that live in that very neighborhood. And we don't. We just drive by in squad cars and wave at people. So we have to have cooperation and trust. It's a two-way street with the community. And that's why it's so important that people respect the police. They know who they are. They feel like they are comfortable in talking with them. And but it's very, very, very valuable, and that's why programs like Crime Stoppers has been successful, because it offers them an opportunity to give information, remain anonymous, and if they desire, to get paid for it.
Well, Sheriff Neil Williamson, we thank you for joining us, and good luck to you as you approach the end of your career, I guess, in law enforcement. Yes. This November.
Well, it's been my honor and pleasure, not just to serve as a sheriff for 20 years, but to serve this community in law enforcement for 41 years. It's a tremendous honor, and I've been afforded many wonderful opportunities to do things and meet people far beyond my ever wildest dreams, and it's been an honor, and thank you for coming down to speak with me.
Oh, you're welcome, and thanks for your service.
Thank you.
You're watching the Illinois Channel.